Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. It's been a long time since we had a roundtable here on American Black Journal, but there have been quite a few controversial stories in the headlines that impact African Americans around the country. We're going to tackle a couple of those topics in today's program. First, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's recent visit to a black church in Detroit. It was met with protests. And also NFL player Colin Kaepernick and his refusal to stand for the national anthem as a way of protesting how African Americans are treated in this country. Joining me now to talk about these topics are Kim Trent, an active civic and community leader here in Detroit, Keith Owens, the senior editor of the Michigan Chronicle, and Greg Bowens, a public relations and political consultant. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's start with Donald Trump's visit to Detroit last week. Kim, I think I saw you in the background of the church swaying along to the music with him. Right. I know you're a big fan.
I am.
But talk about the thing that I think is so interesting in this campaign is not necessarily the things that he says or doesn't say. It's the subtext of those things and what really he might be saying or trying to communicate. And I thought that was really poignant or sort of obvious, I guess, this last weekend, that he was not here talking to the people he was talking to. He's sending messages to other folks.
I just feel sad for people who would allow themselves to be human props for this, because it was so transparent that this had nothing to do with African Americans in our daily life. This was all about courting moderate whites, particularly white women, so that they can feel comfortable casting a vote for someone who is an obvious racist, but who is trying to soften his image after a lifetime. It's not as if he just started saying incendiary things when he started running for president. This is a man who has a very long track record of being a bigot.
Yeah.
And he's gotten worse, not better, in a lot of ways. And then you just flip the script and come into Detroit and say, oh, kumbaya, we should all work together. When you've been one of the most divisive forces, he'll probably go down in American history as one of, particularly as it relates to presidential politics. Certainly in my lifetime, there's been no one like this.
We've certainly not had a candidate like that.
Absolutely not.
George Wallace predates
George Wallace,
right?
he was. Right. Okay, when I was 3.
Right. Greg, I wonder what. I have a friend who is a Republican who said Donald Trump doesn't come to Detroit, you'd criticize him for not focusing on Detroit. Mm-hmm. He does come to Detroit, and you criticize him for not addressing the issues that matter to African Americans. He said, what is it that you really want from him? Is there anything Donald Trump could do to make the case or make an appeal to African American voters?
I think that, one thing that he did do was he brought all the protesters together. I love a good protest. I was all
united the opposition.
United us across all of our different differences we have from time to time to give Trump the finger, which was a lot of fun. I think that I feel for my brothers and sisters who are in the Republican Party. Because it's the party of Lincoln. It was the party that was founded on ending slavery and preserving the Union. Yeah. And many of the people that I know that are very radical about that, they like to remind the Republicans of that. And they have a tough way to go here. The reality for them is, and as African Americans, is that there's really no place for them to go in the party.
Yeah.
They're not even really pretending anymore. Mm-hmm. And many folks would say, well, I'm Republican because the line was shorter. How many times have we heard that, right? To get in and be successful. Yeah. But that short line ends at a shut door. Mm-hmm. And I think that Donald Trump could not actually play to African Americans. Yeah. Because he shut that door open.
Because of the things that he's done in the past.
The things that he's done in the past, starting with the housing discrimination in New York.
Right.
And leading all the way up to today, talking about
Central
the
Park.
the Central Park thing.
Right.
The one thing that I think that we all recognize is that when he gets done with the Muslims, when he gets done with the Mexicans, he's coming for the black.
Well, we're not.
Well, he's been coming for us. I mean, that's the point. I mean, you just mentioned the Central Park 5. Bishop Jackson said he was going to ask these questions. That would have been my very first question. Do you regret at all vilifying, taking out full-page ads, calling for the execution of these 5 young men who were completely exonerated, and you're still using it as a leverage point among people who are motivated by racism? I mean, how can you say, how can black people feel confidence that you're going to run a Justice Department that is going to protect our interests when you made this horrible mistake of judgment? In that case, and that's just one case. That's just one example.
Initially, he was going to be asking those questions. That's the thing we need to remember. Is initially, this thing was sold as Bishop Jackson was going to be asking him questions. I interviewed him before the whole thing. I asked him questions on stage in front, before. Initially, it was going to be in the studio, him one-on-one with Trump. Then it was going to be in congregation. And I said, why did you switch and want to be in front of congregation? Because he wants to help educate his congregation so they can see somebody, don't just depend on the sound bites. It says, well, it's going to be like, educational and to help people, et cetera. Then all of a sudden, Trump's people said, they pulled that back. And he went along with it. He said, oh, okay, so no, it's not going to happen. And then next thing you know, last Friday suddenly says, because they got so much anger, because they realized the whole thing was scripted. Then they say, well, I guess we'll come up for it. And like you say, Stephen, this was not ever meant to be. It was not targeted towards the black audience. This was specifically, this is somebody who's...
I love the way that he clearly was just completely reliant on a script, which is something he's criticized President Obama and Hillary Clinton. Because the whole kind of mystique of him is, I say what I mean. He said, these are my words, that I wrote these words because I mean them from my heart.
He doesn't have any words.
He has never...
He doesn't have any words on this.
The reason he didn't say anything, excuse me, he has never in his life expressed any kind of thoughts like what he did that day.
That's right.
Hard for him.
I want to change the subject just a little bit to another criticism I heard about the criticism of Donald Trump. Someone else said to me, well, what have the Democrats done for black people?
Actually, that's a legitimate question. I mean, the sense that the Democrats are not completely flawless in this, and we've made mistakes as well, that's true. But the thing I would also point out is, in specific, if you want to ask what did the Democrats do, let's look at Detroit. Detroit is the blackest city, big city in the country. Obama saved the auto industry. How many jobs does that provide for black Americans? So we can look at that. We can also look at the fact that Detroit's resurgence is occurring under a Democratic mayor. So I mean, what has Democrats done? Those are two examples, very recent examples in terms of what Democrats do.
And you can't take out of the equation what has happened to Detroit, because he came to Detroit and pointed to the blight and problems that we have and said we've had Democratic leadership. We've had a Republican legislature that is very anti-Detroit since before Detroit was even a black city. I mean, so you have to look at that. You have to look at federal policies. There have been a lot of things in place that have been created in Detroit.
It's not in a vacuum.
Right. And so this idea, people talk about what hasn't gotten done with the Democratic Party. We don't just have a form of government where we have a president and he doesn't have to report to Congress.
Even when
we had Jennifer Graham in office, she had a Republican legislature that really put the brakes on anything that was progressive or tried to, So
the thing that frustrates me, I think, is the inability, though, to focus, especially in a general presidential election, on the things that would help cities like Detroit, on the things that would help African-American people. We did see in the last cycle, or 2 cycles ago in 2008, President Obama, when he was a candidate, talking about health care. I thought that was one of the blackest things you could talk about. But of course, he couldn't cast it in those terms. But it's really difficult to get them in the space where they're comfortable saying, look, we have a problem with race or with inequality, and here's how I plan to address it.
Can I give Hillary Clinton some credit? Because as much as people criticize the crime bill, and I'm a critic of it as well, she has at least addressed the fact that a lot of those things need to be, the provisions of the crime bill need to be rolled back, that there have to be some changes to the justice system, that there has to be changes in the way that this over-incarceration we have of African Americans. At least she's having that conversation. Have you heard Donald Trump say anything about that problem? Mass incarceration is killing our cities like Detroit. But everything is put on these black fathers who are absent when you're incarcerating them at
jail.
Exponential rates.
And you have Donald Trump doubling down on that, talking about how we need to quote unquote restore law and order, which I think is a really coded way of that's a pushback against Black Lives Matter, right?
Well, I mean, we're talking about the crime bill, and that's the big mistake that the Clintons made, I think, and the explosion of the prison industrial complex that occurred, under their watch. But at least people were making it to prison. Here, what Trump is talking about is executing you on the street virtually. That's the thing we've been wrestling with now. Resisting arrest did not used to be an automatic death sentence.
Also look at Trump's rallies. I mean, if he wants to be the law and order candidate, he needs to start with his own rallies.
Stop punching people.
And encouraging him to do so. I will pay your law bill. I mean, I'll pay your legal bills.
No doubt about it. Yeah, you're right.
I want to pivot just a little bit here to talk about Colin Kaepernick, the San Francisco 49ers quarterback who won't stand for the anthem now, saying that that's because of the treatment African Americans get in this country. I think that dovetails some with the talk about Donald Trump and the presidential election and this debate about the debate. Do we have enough of a problem about race that we need to be talking about it, that we need sports figures standing up and saying, hang on a second, something's wrong here? There are a lot of people who don't feel like we do. And I think Trump taps into that frustration.
Well, not only do they not think, they think that the problem with race is that white people are getting a raw deal.
Right,
they think
right. Black people are the problem.
Right, absolutely.
And a lot of the people pushing back against Kaepernick, in fact, are saying, look, this wouldn't be a problem if you would just be quiet.
Right.
If you would just stop talking.
We need to look at the fact also in terms of when you look at the the violence from police against the black community. Many people in the white community were not even aware there was a problem until we started having photo cameras.
That's true.
And so, I mean, we've known this for 40, 50 years, going back further than that, but they're just now seeing the ones that are somewhat conscious, who are saying, wait a minute, something's really wrong.
Right.
And other ones, so now they want to try and say, well, that's not really the case. The police are saying, we're kicking back. But the fact that there's still such a disconnect between what we know to be true in our communities and between what white people have no ideas going on in our communities, and that's where Trump just is, they fill in because we still are very separate. We live like in two different communities, and so when they're operating on what they think is the case. They have one police officer, we have another.
Yes.
Right.
Well, and that gets to something we were talking about before the show, this idea that do we all still even live in the same country anymore? And what worries me about this election is I don't think Donald Trump's going to win. I think he loses, but the 40% of Americans who will likely vote for him, what do we do to sort of re-sew the nation together to be able to talk about these things, not on their terms, but on ours, right? How do you get to the space where we can live together, but deal with some of these problems? I'm really worried about the prospects.
I think one thing that needs to happen, and I don't know if it will, but I think, first of all, I agree. I don't see Trump winning, but I think that the Republicans, the moderate Republicans, the ones I say true Republicans, when this goes, I think, and hopefully they're already talking about that, they need to take their party back. Okay, I mean they leased it out to the inmates from the asylum. They need to take it back. Yeah. I mean there needs to be cooperation across the aisle, and at the same time, and there needs to be cooperation also against that 40%, because the folks who take over the inmates, the crazy ones, need to be dealt with, and there needs to be some cooperation dealing with that faction.
I mean, I understand that people like to say, "Wow, I'm so tired of you talking about race." Well, me too. Get it right.
Once you fix it, I don't want to say anything. Right?
Exactly. You get it right. We won't have to talk about it anymore. And we're on American Black Journal, and we look at some things from a black perspective. But our Asian, brothers and sisters are going through it too. The Muslims, as we know, are going through it too. And so it's
Latinos.
Right. The Latinos are going through it. I mean, for a long time, we've been the standard bearers on race, black people, African Americans. But it's also true that these other folks are catching hell too.
Yeah. Kim, we've got about 2 minutes left. I wonder if so when Obama was elected, I may have been one of the naive people who thought, here's a guy, a black man elected by white people. I mean, black people don't elect the president. White people elected Obama president. I thought, here's the opportunity to pivot on this stuff and be able to talk about race, right? He's got this window. He never got it. It was naive. He never got it. People were angry.
If anything, Barack Obama has been handicapped from being able to, he gave that one beautiful speech during the campaign where he articulated a lot of these thoughts. Yes. But since then, he's been very loath to do that because he is always going to be misunderstood no matter what he says. So
then what's the opportunity if Hillary Clinton
But I have to tell you, this is like a study in intersectionality for me because after having seen what having a black president has done to race in America, it's not because he was black, it's because the country is racist and it just kind of came to the surface. Now I'm a black woman.
Now you're fretting.
So we know that misogyny and sexism is going to be absolutely. So now we have a playbook because we saw what happened when we had a black president. Racism didn't get better, in my view.
It got worse.
Now it may not. It just became more acceptable to be openly racist.
One thing, though, I think that what you said about in terms of the white people elected, but the other thing we need to remember is the fact that those people that elected Obama are still there. And I don't think they have switched their position so much that now they're for Trump. they're still there. And I tend to think, hopefully,
You don't
maybe
feel
still
like
not.
they're the problem.
But I think it's still believed to a degree, hopefully I'm being optimistic, but I mean, it's darkest before the dawn. I mean, I think that, yes, he opened the can of worms, the race, everything, a lot of the ugliness came to light, but the ugliness was there. But those people that elected him the first 2 times with large margins, they are still there, okay? And that could not have happened years ago. So, I mean, to say that all of a sudden we're going back, I don't think we're going, I think it's just a massive fight, some ugly things are going to happen, but I think that has opened the door, and, Hillary gets it and capitalizes on that.
Maybe
I
we
say
get a
still move
chance.
forward.
Maybe we get another chance. I don't know. Boy,
so.
my email box does not suggest that's the case. People are really tired of this conversation.
I was talking to my daughter this morning, putting her on a plane to go to college, and she was talking about Hillary Clinton and trying to figure out who to vote for and that kind of thing. She's certainly not supporting Trump, but I said, you have the luxury of, in your short lifetime, of seeing a black president and now a woman get, this close to the White House. We couldn't even imagine.
Couldn't conceive of it at all.
And so.
All right, so good, there we go. End on a note of progress. Thank you, Greg. All right, guys, thanks for being here. We could do the whole show on this, but we won't.